What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because Damian Lillard is being linked to many Eastern Conference teams, including the Toronto Raptors. And well, as we have to discuss a few other things because the Raptors have been linked to several potential head coaches. We're going to be breaking that down for you as well. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that'd be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. As you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and the shout out for today's video goes out to Eli. So Eli, thank you so much for supporting this channel through your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now let's break that Damian Lillard rumor down first because he was being reported by NBA Central on Twitter. And it said that I think he's going to be on the move. I think he's going to end up in the Eastern Conference, said the Frank Sola, and mentioned teams like the Miami, Atlanta Hawks, Philadelphia 76ers, Toronto, and Brooklyn as potential landing spots for Damian Lillard. And I do want to say one thing before we talk about Toronto, because I mean, I truly do not see Damian Lillard going to Brooklyn Nets because, I mean, you really want to win and you got to question, is Brooklyn that much of a better situation than the Portland Trail Blazers? Like, Mikal Bridges is great. Don't get me wrong. He's an amazing player, but is he going to take him and Damian Lillard together? Are they going to be a championship contender? Not necessarily. And then you obviously have teams like the Miami Heat, with all due respect to them, I just don't think they have the assets to get a deal done there. And then the 76ers, they have Tyrese Maxey, but what other pieces are they going to throw? Like Tobias Harris? It really makes you wonder. So I think this actually makes the Raptors a front runner. And before people say, no, the Raptors don't need Damian Lillard, there's a reason why the media constantly links every star player that goes on the trade market to the Toronto Raptors. And this is going to be linked to what Masai said at the press conference recently, where he mentioned Jakob Poeltl as being a key guy on a championship team. And the Raptors' goal is to win a championship. They can't tank next season because their pick belongs to the San Antonio Spurs. And there's no way they're going to be bad enough to land a top 6 pick in next year's draft. So I think the goal here should always be to win a championship. And Masai Ujiri has always said that he wants to win in Toronto, and he will continue to do that. He's not someone who wants to rebuild. And look, I know a lot of fans will say, well, you should rebuild because you have Scotty Barnes. You have a lot of good young pieces. And if I'm being completely honest, like, I really like Pascal and OG, but the easy solution here is to rebuild. But Masai will never do that. He has not been one to listen to fans, media, ESPN, or what anyone says. He has given DeMar and Kyle time and time after failure, playoff failure after playoff failure, Dwayne Casey getting swept by the Washington Wizards. He's given those guys chance after chance to prove themselves. And if I told you several years ago that a team consistent of Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Jonas Valanciunas, Serge Ibaka will ultimately help you get some pieces to win a championship, you would have called me crazy. So again, I still believe the pieces are there for the Raptors to win a championship. And I think Damian is going to be great. Now let's talk about some things regarding Damian Lillard here. Now, first things first is we have to talk about his contract because he makes an insane amount of money and also his age as well. So he just made $42.4 million. Next season, he's going to be making $45.6 million. And by the end of his contract, he could potentially be making $63 million, which is absolutely insane. But I do want to remind people, when you take a look at salaries, do not look at salaries for what it is now. Look at it in the future. $42 million seems great now, but when you compare it, like, you look at 4 or 5 seasons from now and you compare it to what salaries were 4 or 5 seasons ago, you have to notice that there's a huge difference. And with the new TV deal, I believe there's some sort of kicker coming in with salaries expected to go up. This isn't going to look as bad as it does. Look, $63 million is enormous. Let's not kid ourselves. But when you talk about salaries, ask yourself this question. Yes, it does handicap your salary situation a bit. Well, let's take Steph Curry, for example. Obviously, Steph Curry is making around $47-48 million. Now, would you rather have one player making that much, as good as Steph Curry is, or would you rather have 3 guys, for example, making $16 million, giving you about 15, 16 points a game? So again, that's a big question. Like, obviously the Raptors are not going to get Steph Curry. But if I told you they could get something similar, just a tier level below Steph Curry, that is Damian Lillard. Because when you talk about his statistics, they are off the chart here, and that is exactly what the Raptors need. So Damian Lillard, although he was injured this year, I do want to mention that he was actually shut down by the Portland Trail Blazers because they wanted a higher draft pick. 58 games, yes, injuries are a concern, but the Raptors do have one of the best medical staffs in the NBA. We've known this for quite some time. You know what they did with Kawhi Leonard. I mean, that was incredible. And you look at Damian Lillard's statistics, 32 points. You look at his threes made per game. You look at his percentage, 37% is great on 11 threes. Field goal percentage is reasonable for someone his size. Free throw percentage is amazing. Now, the one thing I do wish to highlight here, that impresses me the most about Damian Lillard. He has constantly put up 25 points per game. Like you look back at several seasons, except for the last season where he was dealing with injuries, he has constantly put up 25 points per game. But he's also been getting a lot of assists. And I understand the numbers are inflated, but the fact that he has almost had no season for almost about 5, 6 seasons where he has had no a season no less than averaging 7 assists is absolutely amazing. Now, for those who are saying, well, the Raptors may not have assets, let me get to the assets part in just a second. But let me ask you one thing. Pascal put up 24, 25 as a number one option, and we know he's not a number one option. And I imagine what he could do with Damian Lillard there. Imagine how much more efficiently he would shoot. Imagine the attention that Damian Lillard would attract from other teams, freeing up guys like Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes as well. So I think that would be elite for the Raptors because you get a closer, you get someone who just can take over games, can score at will. He can, I mean, we've seen what Damian Lillard does, and he solves a lot of the issues for the Raptors. He hits his free throws at an incredibly high rate. So that's a bonus as well. Now, in terms of what the Raptors would give up, because he's making close to, I'm going to quickly go back on the screen here. He's making close to $45 million next season. So you're going to have to get $45 million. Now, obviously, that isn't an easy feat for the Raptors because besides Pascal, not a lot of guys make a lot of money. Now, Scotty Barnes is off the trade block because we're not trading him. But in terms of some of the other guys we could trade, we could do a sign and trade with Fred. Pay Fred a little bit more money to make the salaries work. Pay him $27 million. So you got $27 million. You got Thaddeus Young, who's making $8 million. Then you got Chris Boucher, who's making 11. And look, all of a sudden the salaries make a lot of sense. Obviously, in terms of like how the Raptors are going to give up their draft capital, that may be a little bit more challenging. But I think you have the assets. You can throw in Precious in there. I'm not saying that Delano has a lot of value, but you can throw in different guys. Christian Koloko. You can maybe throw in this year's first round pick, although I don't think that's a smart decision. I'd try to hold on to that as much as possible. So you can go a lot of different routes. Now, the big question would be obviously, would someone like a team like the Portland Trail Blazers accept that? And obviously, I'm going to mention OG Anunoby as well. He's 25 years old. So realistically speaking, I just don't see a team like the Portland Trail Blazers taking him because you would ideally want someone that's a little bit younger. So again, that's my thoughts on Damian Lillard. I think he'd be a great asset. Him and Pascal together would have an elite offense, and I think the Raptors would easily be a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. But with that being said, guys, it's also time to talk about the potential head coaches for the Toronto Raptors. Now, I do want to start with Ime Udoka because we know that he was reported that he's signing with the Houston Rockets as their new head coach, and it was also being reported by Rap City on Instagram. Shout out to them that Ime Udoka decided against pursuing the Raptors head coach job. This was being reported by ESPN. Now, before people say, you know what, he can go to hell, there are a few things to take into consideration. And it's quite reasonable when you think about it. Maybe his family wants to stay in the US. I know that's a big thing for a lot of American players and I guess head coaches as well. And another thing you really need to take into consideration for someone like Ime Udoka is that a Houston job may not be attractive because they're rebuilding as compared to the Raptors that want to win now. But when you compare the situations, like if Ime came in and the Raptors absolutely stunk it up the first year, then all of a sudden now a lot of questions arise towards the ability of Ime to coach a team. Whereas with Houston, he can afford to have 2 bad seasons, but then slowly be expected to progress slowly. So it's not like teams will be looking at Ime a lot different, or just everyone around the NBA will be looking at him a lot different if the Rockets miss the playoffs because they're not really expected to do much. He's expected to slowly build that team up. Whereas with the Raptors, you want to build this team up right away and also establish a culture. So I think there's a little bit more pressure to be the coach for the Toronto Raptors as it currently is, rather than a team like the Houston Rockets. So again, that's my thoughts. Again, look, Ime, obviously that's pretty crazy that he turned the Raptors thing down, but it is what it is. But there's always opportunities to hire other coaches as well. Like I said, I have my thoughts about Ime Udoka. It is what it is. I don't think he would have been great for some of our young guys, but it's time to talk about some of the other guys as well. Now, another name that was being thrown out there, and this was shout out to Rap City once again, was Frank Vogel is a possible candidate to become the next head coach for the Toronto Raptors. This was being reported by Michael Grange. I do want to say I'm not the biggest Frank Vogel fan. I think he's a very smart coach. He doesn't stand out because he's not very loud. He doesn't make crazy things like how Nick Nurse does in terms of like the plays and like boxing ones and things like that. I think he's a good coach, but I don't know if he's the right fit That's the big thing with the Raptors. I don't think it's so much so about which coach it is. I think it's about the right fit. So I don't know if Frank Vogel can come in and really establish some of the young guys. And you have to question, is Frank Vogel going to be committed to the Raptors beyond 2, 3 seasons, right? So that's the thing. Like if you're going to hire a head coach, if you're going to establish a culture with the Raptors, you want that person, whoever the head coach may be, to be here for several seasons. I don't want a new coach in 2 or 3 seasons. I want this next coach to stick around for at least 4 to 5 seasons. So you want to establish a culture, you want to win as well. So with all due respect to Frank Vogel, I think he's a great defensive coach, but I don't know if he's the right fit for this. And we also had some other news as well, because there's so much news talking about the Raptors' potential head coaches. Now, this was being reported by Chris Haynes that said that Toronto Raptors retained assistant coach Adrian Griffin after parting ways with head coach Nick Nurse, and he's expected to receive an interview for the waking position. League sources tell NBA on TNT at Bleacher Report. Now, I do want to say Adrian Griffin is a very interesting choice. He's a man that many of us know very little about. We know his son plays for the Atlanta Hawks, and there's been a few times, especially this season, when Nick stepped away from the team where Adrian came in. And right away, the one thing I noticed about Adrian was his minutes management was a little bit better. Like you saw guys like Malachi Flynn play a little bit more. You saw guys like Delano Banton play a little bit more. So I know the immediate reaction from a lot of Raptors fans may be, well, here we go again. We fired Nick Nurse and we're hiring his assistant. We need a new system. I don't necessarily think that's always the case, excuse me, because people were saying similar things when Nick Nurse was hired. People were outraged that Nick Nurse was hired because we fired Dwayne Casey. And people were saying that, why did we fire Dwayne Casey only to hire his assistant coach? And we know how that turned out. So we want a championship. I'm not saying we'll do the same with Adrian, but sometimes it's not so much that we need a complete overhaul. We just need little changes. So again, I think Adrian is very interesting. I don't know enough about him to really comment on how I think he would do with the Raptors. I think he could be someone that could come in and do a good job. I don't know if he'd do a great job, but only time would tell. But he does seem very interesting in terms of the minutes management, in terms of playing some of the bench guys a little bit more and playing the young guys a little bit more. So, I mean, they may not be a bad option. I'm very curious to hear some other names out there. I think there are a few more names we could hear, but I'm very curious to hear all of your thoughts on this. Damian Lillard, the head coaches for the Raptors, potential head coaches. Do you like Frank Vogel? And let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question is, which of these NBA coaches has the most wins in their career? Is it A, Frank Vogel? Is it B, Kenny Atkinson? Is it C, Mike D'Antoni? Or is it D, Mark Jackson? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.